going to stick a knight here. He takes it off. He takes the bishop. So he took it off this bishop. And he's threatening this pawn. I don't think he took this right away, because he played here first. Now he took the bishop.
Bobby Fischer is one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest chess player in the world.
And now he took the rook.
Bobby Fischer, United States. World title contender.
Now Black surprised him with this move.
Bobby Fischer is an isolated man.
Bobby Fischer's a strange man.
People think that there's something wrong with the man.
And then the king moves, takes the queen.
The great Bobby Fischer is here tonight.
Like a child, not a champion.
His social life is a vacuum.
The most arrogant man you're ever likely to meet.
He takes it back, it gets checked.
Looking for Bobby Fischer.
Whatever happened to Bobby Fischer?
Reclusive.
Threatening this pawn, and it's a dead lost game.
Bobby Fischer is searching for asylum.
It's really Fischer against the world.
And here White resigned.
Bobby Fischer interview. Right. Try not to tense up. Bobby, you've given virtually your entire life to the world of chess. What about Bobby Fischer, the man? What's he like?
I don't know, it's pretty, chess and me, it's like, it's hard to take them apart, Just like my alter ego, I don't really,
But there are times when you get away from that chessboard. What do you do?
I don't do too much at the most. I'm really, tied up in chess. I intend to expand, but first I gotta get the title. It's basically...
Bobby, what does it take to make a good chess player?
Talent, skill, patience. You have to study a lot and work.
What would your ultimate aim be?
Well, I'd like to be a world champion and keep it for maybe 20 years or so.
20 years.
Fischer is to chess what Muhammad Ali is to boxing.
Will Fischer beat the Russian? Yes, Fischer will beat the Russian.
You honestly think that you probably are the world's greatest chess player?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
In the 18-month period, in the run-up to his challenge to Boris Spassky, Fischer had beaten and in some cases destroyed some of the best Soviet players.
Fischer was wiping away his opposition like flies. He went on a 20-game winning streak, which was unheard of in championship chess.
Bobby Fischer was exciting not only the chess world, but the world.
There's trouble in Northern Ireland. Henry Kissinger is shuttling to and from Vietnam. And against that competition, the chess dominates.
In Moscow today, the Soviet Chess Federation called an angry news conference to denounce Bobby Fischer.
General Motors recalls 500,000 Chevrolet Vegas, and
Bobby Fischer, true to his recent erratic behavior,
finished off Tigran Petrosyan of the Soviet Union, a former world champion. It was the best news story of the day. The victory gave Fischer the right to play the world's champion, Boris Spassky, another Russian, next spring.
We all had hopes. We all wanted him to be world chess champion.
The one person he was yet to beat was Boris Spassky.
You said it's your title the Russians are holding. You don't like the Russians.
The Russians have cheated at chess. They've tried every way to avoid me, to avoid giving me a chance for a match. And they've slandered my name. And, they're just dead afraid of me. They have been for years. That's the true story.
And now you're going to get them?
Well, now I'm going to try to get them, yeah.
Soviets had been winning these tournaments, and I thought it would be good for America, for democracy, to have an American winner.
The stakes really couldn't be much higher politically, popularly in people's minds. You know, these were two enemies who were not fighting a real war, but were trying to outdo one another strategically all the time.
We will not tolerate being pushed around.
We have a design and the material assets to deal with the Soviet Union.
Как никогда прочны международные позиции Советского Союза.
This little thing with me and Spassky, instead of, with bombs, having it out over the board.
One of the superpowers, the Soviet Union, had made chess its national sport. They had spent unlimited amount of money. They had hundreds of grandmasters. They won every tournament, every chess Olympiad.
Я кричал: вы что там, обалдели? Что же вы уронили шахматный престиж?
For communist regime, keeping the crown was very important ideologically. This communist state took over chess to use it as proof of intellectual superiority over decadent West. Everybody knew that the crown has to remain in the Soviet Union.
Вы мускулы стальные, пальцы цепкие мои, эх, резные расписные, деревянные ладьи.
In the Soviet Union, everybody of talent was cultivated, was given financial help, coaching. All the top players were privileged people. In the United States, we didn't have any of that. Every single one of us was on his own.
And here came this lone American combating the might of the Soviet chess machine. National prestige was at stake.
Fischer recognized that he was representing not only him, but the entire free world. I think there was just too much on his shoulders.
You tell us how old you are and where you're from.
I'm 15, I'm from Brooklyn.
He is 15 years old and he is from Brooklyn. All right? Will you show your headline to camera 3 and to Dick Clark, because we'll make him go to work on you. It says, teenager's strategy defeats all comers.
This strategy, did it involve finances?
No.
Did you have any help?
No.
Did it all by yourself? Did it make people happy?
Made me happy.
This young man's name is Bobby Fischer, and already he is the United States chess champion. He is 15 years old and he has defeated the masters. He is the United States champion in chess.
I met Bobby when I was 14 and he was 8 in one of the chess clubs in Manhattan. He was the youngest kid around. He was unassuming. He was well-mannered. He was a nice kid. His mother, Regina, she was a woman who had to work 2 jobs, single mom, supporting 2 children, Bobby and Joan.
Regina was really the genius of the family. She spoke quite a number of languages, including Russian. She worked as a telegraph operator, a nurse, a welder. She actually got a PhD in hematology as well.
She was an activist. She was a communist. And the FBI files on her are quite extensive.
His mother was hounded by the FBI because they thought she was possibly a Soviet spy. This was a period when Jew and communists were equated. So his mother denied his Jewishness.
His mother told him if he would be sitting on the stoop at 560 Lincoln Place, apartment 4Q, and somebody would come up to him and ask him a question, he would say, I have nothing to say to you. That was the proper answer that his mother told him to say.
You're from Brooklyn originally?
Chicago. Well, born in Chicago. Moved to Brooklyn when I was about 6. I lived on the coast.
Were you playing chess by then?
I learned in New York, yeah.
What age?
6.
When did you start to get serious about chess?
Well, I was maybe 7.
If you can think back to your childhood and all the things you did after school and on the weekends, and imagine just filling all that in with chess study, chess lessons, chess practice, chess competition.
Sure, Bobby Fischer starts with a very exceptional mind. But genius is not only about a particular innate gift for X. Genius is about a desire to do X. It's about a willingness to sacrifice. It's about an ability to develop that kind of obsessive interest in perfecting one's ability to do some task. People who studied expertise have looked at classical music composers, at surgeons, at chess players, interested in figuring out what do high achievers have in common. They have always, almost without exception, put in 10,000 hours of deliberate practice first.
From very young, he was really living for chess. Even when he was eating, he would always have a chess board with him and study new variations.
That love component is such an enormous part of the achievement of any kind of genius, because if it's dutiful, there's no way you can be that obsessive about it. There was nothing else he would rather do.
I started playing games with myself. I would make the white moves and the black moves, and just try to use pawn, play through the whole game, and eventually I would checkmate the other guy. I almost always won.
White comes out with a knight. Now we just bishop. Brown.
Then my mother started to get worried that it wasn't healthy to be playing chess by myself all the time.
Now black surprised him with this one.
Regina was so worried that she decided to take him to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said, "Don't worry, there are worse things to be obsessed by than chess."
Everybody said to him, "What happened?" And he said, "One day I just got good." He was suddenly out of everyone else's league, and everybody knew it.
Fischer would open a chess magazine, okay, like this. He would open it like this. He would say, okay, here, let's see, here, okay, here, okay, here. Now, it looks like he's just like looking at the pictures, right? That's what you think he's doing. No, he's not doing it. He's playing through the entire game in his head in a few seconds. Every move.
He went from being my peer in chess to being the United States chess champion. A quantum leap.
That's when he first became famous. This is 1958. No chess player ever made much money in those days. And my father basically arranged an exhibition tour for him in which he went from city to city playing anywhere from 40 to 80 people at a time. And I don't know how much he got then, maybe $5 a board.
Regina decided that this was a way to the big time. She'd call me up and say, "I want Bobby to go on Channel 2 on Sunday, and he won't do it if I ask him, so I want you to tell him." He just wanted to learn the game, and she really wanted him to get publicity.
Fame is definitely a mixed blessing, and almost everybody would admit that at some point in their life they wish they had it. Once it starts, it's fun, and the fun quickly wears off when you want to be alone, private and public, if that's ever possible. But also it's horrendous on the psyche for the young, because it totally distorts their world.
He had all these people around who really wanted a piece of him. If they only wanted to be in his glow. And people have all kinds of motives, not always in his favor. They're trying to make money out of him. They're trying to be associated with him. They're talking behind his back, you know. He couldn't stand any of that. Particularly, he couldn't stand the press because he was such an individual. He was an ideal object for caricature.
You watch television?
No, not much. Very rarely.
Why?
I don't know. I read that you get little radiation from it. I don't know. I've talked with a few scientist friends of mine. They say you do it. In fact, you do get a little, but they don't think it's dangerous.
What kind of magazines do you like?
Well, my favorite magazine is Confidential. I read that all the time.
Why do you like that?
They've got a lot of inside stories on things like water pollution. It's pretty interesting. I like read up on that. A lot of things that the government is concealing, you know.
Fischer looked at the world his own way. I mean, Bobby was not socialized the way the rest of us were. Every idea he had virtually had to come through his own thinking.
In these days, he was unusual, but he hadn't gone off the deep end yet.
Boxing champions have been coming to the Catskill Mountains of New York for almost half a century to get in shape. But does a chess champion need to train physically? Take a look behind that window into the training headquarters of Bobby Fischer. Championship chess is a physically exhausting game. More than just a test of mind and will, it is a contest of physical endurance too. Bobby is 29 and he lives virtually a monastic life. He lives alone, always in hotel rooms that seem barely larger than chessboards. A lot of the time he won't even answer his telephone. The television set is his window on the world. Exercise is part of it.
I'm a world-class Olympic-level coach. I'm also a world champion in the bench press, and I've trained a lot of celebrities, but no one can match the fabulous Bobby Fischer. He was interested in the human body, how it performed, and how it could be more productive. He said, I want you to work on my grip. See this dynamometer? I want to squeeze this thing all the way to the end. I said, the world's strongest man has not squeezed 100 kilograms. He said, I'll squeeze 105. I said, why? When I shake that little Russian's hand, I want him to feel it. I started him off with a little swimming, racquetball, which we were quite good at, a little weight training. And I said, repeat this after me. I'm a winner. I'm a champion. I'm not a loser. And he says, why'd you put the loser thing in there? You know I'm a champion.
Bobby is probably the most interesting person I've ever photographed. There he is, there's Bobby. And he said he to hold my breath like this, and it's, you know, it was good for his training. He was in training for Spassky. He asked me, what other jobs do? I told him I've just finished one on the New York Jets. They thought that was marvelous. They thought he wanted to hear all about it, how they train. And he said, you know, I've got to train like that as well. And he didn't mind anything I did. But it could have gone either way. He treated everybody else quite awful.
Bobby Fischer is a stubborn young man. Sometimes he fights for principle, more often just for himself. He'll refuse to play a match because his special terms aren't met. And for the past month, he's been giving fits to the International Federation, too. Not enough money for the winner of the world title, he says.
there was bidding on the match. And Iceland got it, I guess because they put up the highest bid. And Bobby didn't want to play. He said the country's too small. They don't have the facilities, they don't have communication.
The International Chess Federation wants word by tomorrow morning from Fischer on whether he's agreeable to 24 games in Iceland, and Fischer is taking his time answering.
You, as president of the Icelandic Chess Federation, are there times where you have been tempted to say, let's forget all about it?
As you know, we are organizing a chess match, and our only wish is to enrich the chess world.
They had all these lawyers, and they were raising demands all the time. But at the same time, it was never clear whether Fischer would come to Iceland.
Some of the principal one was the prize money.
And I said, we have already settled the money question, and we will not be ready to discuss that.
There was a real possibility that the match wouldn't take place. One has to remember with Fischer that he dropped out of tournaments before. This was no bluff necessarily.
He's going, he's not going. And then he told me he was going. He more quietly put his hands on my shoulders and says, I'm going to Iceland, Harry. You know, it was... So, and the next thing I was reading the paper would be, he's not going.
Just the insanity of the situation. I mean, get that contract done. But Bobby wouldn't sign it. And then Bobby disappeared.
Boris Spassky, the world chess champion, came to Iceland 12 days before the match scheduled to start Sunday. Spassky said he wanted time to get used to the place, without, incidentally, being constantly molested by newsmen. Bobby Fischer was also sensitive about being photographed, sensitive to the point that he kept not showing up.
He was sitting in Pasadena, California, and my job, my personal mission, was to get Bobby to go to Iceland and play the World Championship match. But I didn't see any activity. I didn't see any plane ticket. I said, Bobby, I have to go to New York. My dad is sick. Let's travel together. You'll be that much closer to Iceland. He said, yeah, I think that's a good idea, travel with a friend. Yeah, okay. I was getting him closer to where he had to go. We took him to Kennedy Airport. We were headed for the Icelandic Airlines counter. Somehow, a Daily News photographer spied him, and Bobby started running. He wasn't just running, he was sprinting. I turned around, and I stopped, and I put my hands up. I didn't say anything. And Bobby kept running right out of the airport to the curbside limousine and got in and left the airport. Where to? Nobody knew. It was only 3 days before the scheduled start of the match. Chess history was in the balance. I said, you could stay at my parents' home in Douglaston, Long Island.
Don't think the bell works. It works.
Can I ask what you're here for?
Hi, where are you?
What are you here for? Why are you in our driveway? Is there some reason why you want to be in our driveway?
Oh, I guess you know what
You know, you people spoiled everything Thursday night. You did. No, I suggest you don't repeat it, because it's going to be a very great tragedy if you do.
Bobby was staying at Sadie's house, and Sadie's father was dying of cancer at the time. I don't know whether he told you that. And they were trying their best to get Fischer on that plane to Iceland. At one point, Sadie said, you know, my father's dying. And Bobby says, that's okay, I don't mind. You know, they could not dislodge him from that house.
This was probably the most stressful week of my life.
Are you Dr. Sadie?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Fischer made it clear that he would try to go to Iceland tonight. Did he express these thoughts to you?
Made it clear to whom?
We had talked to a few people, and they had the impression he was going.
Everybody can have impressions, but the only person who knows what Bobby Fischer is going to do is Bobby Fischer. That's about all I really want to say.
I see.
I want you to all keep cool. At one point during his stay at our home, he simply said, it's over. I'm not going.
Still no sign of Bobby Fischer. Today, the International Chess Federation postponed by 48 hours the start of the match, but it said if Fischer is not in Iceland by noon on Tuesday, he will be disqualified.
Mr. Johnson, if I may ask, are you worried?
No.
And I just wondered if you've ever seen Mr. Fischer, if you have any proof that he actually exists.
That's a good question. Yes, I think, gentlemen, we can agree on the point that Mr. Fischer exists.
We were losing the whole thing. We had to get Fischer to come to Iceland. The Soviet Union had the feeling that the world chess champion was humiliated. They wanted to call Spassky back to the Soviet Union. Boris said to me, this is a very severe situation. You have to solve this on a higher level.
Guðmundur Thorarinsson, I think he asked the Prime Minister of Iceland to call Kissinger.
Fischer was very reluctant to go, and I placed a call to him, and I said to him, go.
The United States of America wanted Bobby to go there and win the world title. By that time, James Slater, the British multimillionaire, had already doubled the purse. So Fischer's answer to Kissinger was, yes, I've decided to play.
What finally did make you decide to go then?
I feel that the prestige of this country is at stake.
Some people have suggested this was psychological warfare against Spassky on your part. Did that figure into it?
No, I don't believe in psychology. I believe in good moves.
Bobby Fischer left New York for Iceland. And what a scene that was on the morning of July the 4th.
Nothing like this has ever happened in Iceland before. You try to describe the impact on the citizens here of Reykjavik. It's probably about the same as if the promoters of the next Joe Frazier-Muhammad Ali prize fight decided to stage their international extravaganza in Butte, Montana.
One observer said the chess match was turning into the biggest thing to hit Iceland since Eric the Red. Though some people were still mad at Fischer, others approved of his holdout for more money.
Well, he was fighting for all the chess players of the whole world, I think.
He's tedious, he's arrogant, he's inconsiderate. Basically, people think that there's something wrong with the man.
We wanted to receive him as a king. But Bobby saw all the crowd coming against him. So he just rushed down the ramp for the first car in the convoy.
I became his private bodyguard. It was a big moment for me, you know. I was more of his friend than a bodyguard. He was quite a character, you know. He could be gentle, but he could be like a volcano sometimes. And it was better to know when to speak and when to keep quiet, actually.
Finally, Bobby showed up in Iceland. Now, is he going to really play for the World Championship?
It's been a long road for Fischer to this game, and it'll be a long match at the end of that road. Both he and Spassky have to play 24 games. The match could last up to 2 months. Each game runs to 5 hours. The most intellectually exhausting battle known to the mind of man. The World Chess Championship.
We had the Icelandic government, the Icelandic president, the ambassador of the Soviet Union, the ambassador of the United States, and many foreign guests. The theater was full.
Regularly scheduled programs will not be seen at this time, so we may bring you the following sports special.
ABC Sports presents the World Chess Championship match between Boris Spassky, the defending champion from the Soviet Union, and 29-year-old Bobby Fischer, the challenger from the United States.
It was the Super Bowl. The audiences were gigantic. People stayed home from work.
People were lining up in front of TV sets in department stores. There were chess groupies.
On Times Square, they were showing the game live. It was that important.
Let's find out from you, Larry, if there are any late-breaking developments.
They might fuss around with the chess pieces and the size of the board and the lighting, but I'm fairly confident the match will start on time.
Boris Spassky, the world chess champion, was there with all his assistants. But Fischer was not here.
The clock has now been started. It was officially 5 o'clock in Reykjavik. Spassky is obviously anxious about the whereabouts of Mr. Fischer.
Bobby was nowhere to be seen. And all of us despaired.
If Fischer doesn't show up by the time 1 hour has elapsed, he forfeits the game automatically. Oh, there he goes now. He's just played one pawn to queen 4.
You saw Spassky make his move, then he touched his clock, which turns his clock off, but turns his opponent's clock on. So Fischer's time is now ticking.
There was no certainty that even though this was the biggest match of his life, he would actually show up.
See, many people think that his antics were designed to upset Spassky, to discombobulate Spassky, which they did, but I don't think that was their intent.
I don't think any of this was directed against Spassky. It was his own inner demons that he was fighting.
Unpredictable Bobby Fischer.
Nobody really knows why Bobby Fischer does or does not do anything.
The most individualistic, intransigent, uncommunicative, solitary chess master of all time.
He has no permanent home.
Fischer is a nomad.
Speaks to almost no one.
No contact with his family. Troubled childhood. He hasn't seen his mother in over 10 years.
Is your mother still living? Do you get a chance to see her very much?
I haven't seen her in a few years, yeah.
What about your father?
No, I don't see him.
Are they living together?
No, her.
I never talk about my father. That's what Fischer said. I never talk about my father. This was what led me to realize that there was something special about Fischer's father that nobody else knew.
Regina Fischer has a 900-page FBI file, and one of the things it reveals is that Bobby Fischer's father was not Gerhard Fischer, as had been supposed and as the family had allowed to be known. In fact, Bobby Fischer's father was a man named Paul Nemenyi.
Gerhard Fischer, who was officially listed on the birth certificate, never came to America.
Regina and Paul Nemenyi met at a university near Denver, and they had an affair. Regina moved on and took the baby Bobby with her. Regina often, because she was destitute and needed help, would go to social service agencies and ask for help. Paul Nemenyi would show up and consult with the social workers because he was very concerned about Bobby. He said that Bobby, even at a very young age, was a very upset child. He was afraid that he wasn't being raised right. Later, when Bobby moved to New York City, Paul would come and take him out to restaurants and would admonish him for having bad table manners and would basically act towards him in the way that a father would. One day, Bobby asked his mother, "Where's Paul? Why isn't he coming around anymore?"
When Nemanja died, that's when his mother told him he was his real father. He learned about it only about the time he was 9 years old.
Chess to him was the ultimate escape, his single obsession.
Well, Spassky is waiting.
Right, and waiting and wondering whether Bobby will show or not show. And there's absolutely dead silence in the hall.
Spassky is pacing, he's nervous, and...
Wait, here comes Fischer, coming on the stage saying that he was caught in traffic. And I think Spassky was visibly relieved.
And also perhaps pained.
It didn't look like this match would happen, but finally it happened. And it was phenomenal.
How do you spell relief, okay?
Now, for the first time, we're looking at Bobby Fischer, the man that 8 times has won the United States Open Championship.
I remember saying on TV at one point during the match, I said, you know, we're really lucky to be alive at this moment when Bobby Fischer is playing Boris Spassky.
There's his first move, one knight to king, bishop 3. Very non-committal.
Now watch, see Fischer turn around here? Yeah. He's checking to see that camera location. And now he goes over to protest those cameras being there.
There's Lothar Schmidt in the background.
Bobby said, "I feel disturbed. I cannot have that, please."
Spassky remains serene and imperturbable throughout all this.
The first game started out with some minor psychological games in the opening, but then it calmed down, and the position that we reached after 28 moves seemed like a complete draw. It seemed like they're going to agree to a draw shortly and move on to the next game.
All the pieces were traded. They got into an endgame. Each side had a bishop and a bunch of pawns.
It was very easy. It was a dead draw. The position reached a very even position, virtually symmetrical.
And Fischer went haywire. He did something that hardly anyone would do except a rank amateur. He grabbed a pawn, allowing his bishop to be trapped.
He made a colossal beginner's blunder. He took a pawn, which allowed Spassky to trap his bishop. We couldn't believe it.
This looks like an error, but this is Fischer playing the move. There must be more to it than that. There must be an explanation. There must be some deep combination that we've missed.
И думал, что в крайнем случае он все же ничьей добивается. Но он хотел показать Спасскому, что он готов с ним бороться. Вот и он пошел на эту борьбу. Но Фишер ошибся.
Bobby saw 6 moves ahead here. When he made the move, he just didn't see 7 moves ahead. White can interpolate a move. He can play bishop to queen, too. Notice that cuts off the escape square. And then all that White has to do on the next move is play king to knight 2, and the bishop is lost. That was the shot heard around the world.
It was inexplicable. I still don't know how that happened.
Spassky won the first game.
You had to get to 12.5 points, the best of 24. A win is 1, a loss is 0, and a draw is 1/2.
He had an agreement that the cameras be quiet, and Bobby said they aren't quiet, and they disturb me.
He claimed that the noise from the machines was so high that he couldn't, you see, he couldn't think or concentrate.
I believe that, by the way. I think that he had hyperacusis, a medical condition characterized by excessive sensitivity to noise.
Fischer said he would boycott the match until hidden movie cameras are removed from the playing hall. The promoters said the entire financial structure of the match depends on recording and exhibiting the play.
He asked to put the camera away.
He wanted me to clear the cameras out of the hall. And I said no.
You have to start in time. If a player is not present, you have to, as an arbiter, press his clock.
Fischer had been known to quit matches over trivia. So we were afraid that he would just, run back home and would be the end of it.
Bobby did not show up. I had, as the arbiter, to forfeit him, and for a moment I thought, did I make the right decision? Was it fair? Was it correct? But it was necessary. There was no other way. This night I remember that I have been woken up by tears in my eyes, that I, as an arbiter, had to destroy a genius.
He was now trailing 2-0. It's very hard to make that up in a 24-game match.
Half the world thought that's it. The match is over, he'll never come back. Why would he even bother trying, to come back from such a difficult situation?
During the match, he would knock on my door about 1 or 2 in the morning. We'd just walk and walk. And we would sit and look at the animals. He loved animals. And he would talk, but he didn't like to talk about his childhood. It was a bad subject. He did tell me that, from the age of 2 or 3, he was left alone all day with his sister. The loneliness.
Regina, for all of her gifts, was not a traditional mother. She was a person who moved her kids around from place to place, even every few months when they were really little.
There was obvious conflict between Regina and Bobby from an early age.
He didn't like to have his mother around. She would end up having to send his sister Joan abroad with him on tournaments. He wouldn't play if his mother was along. Regina moved out of the apartment that he shared with her in Brooklyn when he was only 16 years old.
He told his mom to leave, I don't know how politely, and she left. In a way, he rejected her because she was so like him, so pushy, so self-centered, so goal-directed. Maybe he was splitting off part of himself.
In 1960, Regina went to Europe to get her MD degree, and Bobby would have still been living on Lincoln Place in Brooklyn then.
I went to his apartment a couple of times, and it was roach-ridden. It was a walk-up tenement. He had chess books all over the place, and he was just in a complete state of disarray.
The fact is, his mother left him. Think about yourself. If suddenly your father wasn't there and your mother disappeared, said goodbye, how'd you feel? What would have happened to you?
Bobby is all chess. I don't play chess, and I don't pretend to speak for Bobby. But I feel that whatever I do here, whatever I say to help make the Vietnam come to an end more quickly, will help every son, every daughter in the whole world.
1, 2, 3, 4, sign the treaty, end the war. 1, 2, 3, 4, sign the treaty, end the war. 1, 2, 3, 4, sign the treaty, end the war.
You're not going to believe this, Bill, but I'm inside of a wind tunnel about 12 feet away from where the players are playing. The problem, of course, is that Fischer has stated that he wants no noise, no disturbance whatsoever.
Fischer said, well, I'll continue, but the third game has got to be away from the auditorium inside a sealed room. There's a little ping pong room in the back of the stage. And Spassky agreed.
You can't change the location without both sides' permission once a match has started.
He could have claimed the match on a forfeit. He didn't have to play in that packed room. If he hadn't, Fischer would have not played, and the match would not have continued.
Bobby started again to quarrel. No, not this one and not that, etc. And Boris said in this moment, so I retire. I do not want this. This is too much for me. If so, we end the match. The two boys were standing together at the table, and I took them here, both, pressed them down in the stool. Now you play. Boris automatically made his first move.
The game could still be watched by a closed-circuit TV camera.
The audience was in the hall, and they could follow the game move by move.
In Game 3, Bobby played an opening, a defense he had never played before, the Benoni, which means son of sorrow. It is so risky, so fraught with danger that whenever you play that, you're simply saying, we're not going to make a draw. This is win or lose. This is a fight to the death.
Bobby moved his knight to the edge of the board.
There's a saying in chess, Ein Springer am Rand bringt Kummer und Schand. A knight on the side I will not abide. It was against principle.
It's not considered a good idea because the center of the board typically is the most important battleground, and that's where we want to position our pieces, or at least in a way that our pieces attack the middle of the board.
Not only did he move the knight to the side of the board, but it also could have been captured by a bishop, and he would have had a very ugly-looking double pawn way over on the side of the board, which it was very unaesthetic, let's say.
So you see Spassky is literally sitting on the edge of his chair, which seems a little more relaxed than Spassky, but Spassky is very tense.
More tense than you've seen him?
Yes. I think he feels that he may be game.
He may be what?
May be losing the game.
I see.
Spassky obviously hadn't spent that much time studying this kind of position because the idea was relatively rare. So that put already Spassky in a difficult psychological position.
Spassky did not find the best continuation and was consistently outplayed until Fischer won his first game of his life against Spassky. He was on the scoreboard.
What do you think of Bobby Fischer?
I like him. I like his style.
Are you following the games?
Yes, I am. American chess players are behind Bobby 100%, and they're all anxious to see him get in there and win the championship.
Do you think that Fischer will win for the first time over the Russian champion?
I think Fischer will win because he's playing for $200,000. But if Spassky wins, most of the money will go to the Russian government.
People sat in bars betting on what the next move was going to be, the way they bet on whether there's going to be a hit in a baseball game. That's when chess really exploded.
Move me on to any black square. Use me anytime.
Tell me what turns you on about chess?
What?
Do you hope to be as good as Bobby Fischer one day?
Well, I'd hope to, but I doubt if I would be.
Why?
Well, I just think Fischer's just about the best player in the world. Not very many people can get to be as good as he is.
We're watching the looming presence of Boris Spassky and Bobby Fischer, as sketched by Leroy Neiman, noted artist and a familiar face to Wide World. Leroy is here with me at the Wide World studio in New York, and he's going to be sharing some of his artistic impressions with us in just a minute.
Larry, I thought going up there to that chess match would be like watching a grass grow, but it was far more exciting than I ever expected it to be.
Well, I thought it was pretty exciting, too.
Right. It was just like the Ali Fraser fight all over again. This is Bobby Fischer leaving the hotel for the fight like a matador leaving the Palace Hotel in Madrid. On stage, the tension is developing. It's a real prize fight. That's when he's a fighter. And this right hand is like it struck and drew blood on Spassky.
The score was even. 2.5, 2.5.
Spassky was not himself. All these shenanigans had affected him adversely. He was not playing his true game.
Полный разгром, фиаско. Почему Спасский был в какой-то степени упрям? Потому что, когда встречается двое, я повторяю, и когда кто-то что-то уступает, нету вакуума психологического. Если ты уступил, то это место занял другой. Вот так произошло в третьей партии. К нам поступила, наверное, масса писем, а в письмах говорилось прямо: следите за Фишером, он вот то-то, то-то, то-то делает.
They believed that the chairs had been wired and the lighting fixture to destabilize Boris's concentration. That's when Boris cracked.
Spassky complained that there was some radiation which was affecting him.
During the match, I felt myself quite unusually, like before. So that was the reason to be for myself. I'm not suspicious man, to become suspicious.
There might be something in the chair. There might be something on the surface of the chair. There might be something in the light.
They inspected the chairs and the lights to see whether the Americans were up to some kind of hanky-panky. They found 2 dead flies, and that was it.
Game 6 is very celebrated. It is probably the most